Brian, would you like to talk about the big debut?
Yeah, I think this is the big story everyone was talking about with Raw.
Because Chad Gable had said last week to who runs this thing? Adam Pearce, whoever. Get the best luchador that you can find, the greatest luchador in the world, and put him against me. I'm going to fight him. And Gable comes out to the ring and he's getting the Kurt Angle "you suck" chant, right? On the entrance for obvious reasons, because, it's very reminiscent. And then comes the big reveal that they even said was an open secret, like anybody didn't know this was happening. But the blackout, and then the lighting, and then the zero Mido, and here comes Penthouse. Although now I'm gonna call him Penta McGee in honor of Tom McGee, and I'm gonna start calling Chad Gable Brett Gable in honor of Bret Hart. Because I know, and no, I'm not saying he's bad as Tom McGee. But everybody's talking about this great debut, and we can talk about this in a second. Chad Gable is the one that made this debut great. I'm sorry.
Can you explain that for the listeners who don't understand the reference, the Tom McGee Bret Hart match, what it means?
Well, and we've talked about it before and in past on the program, but for the younger listeners, Tom McGee was a guy that Vince had found in, 1985? And Tom McGee was a bodybuilder and a power lifter and a gymnast, and he was like 6'5", and he had blonde hair and movie star looks. And Vince thought he was going to be the next Hulk Hogan because, look at this fucking guy. It's amazing. And he brings him in and he has a dark match with Bret Hart. And Bret Hart made him look like the goddamn next Hulk Hogan. And the problem from there was that he didn't work with Bret Hart every night for the rest of his life. And reality set in. And within a year and a half, they'd sent him to Japan. They'd cycled him through a couple places. They'd tried him in dark matches. And finally, they just said, fuck it. He was rotten. I'm not saying that.
In an era where they had a lot of rotten workers on their roster, that wasn't really a thing that prevented people from being hired.
No, this was stunningly. Like, the fans of the time laughed at shit that he did. But I'm not saying Penthouse, our friend from AEW, is that bad, but I wrote down, hear my notes? Hear that? I wrote down at the start of it, will he be any better here than he was in AEW? And he was doing the same fingers and the same poses, but he had a lot more energy to it. But the first thing they did when the bell rang, he grabbed a headlock on Gable with his right arm. And Gable tried to shoot him off, and it looked ridiculous. And I'm like, what the... how do you make your debut on WWE Worldwide Television and grab a headlock with the wrong fucking arm? And Gable was doing all of the stuff that Penta does, but he was doing it better than Penta. And the fans were chanting, Penta, Penta, because they were in San Jose. People are primarily in the crowd, obviously, from later on, bilingual or have some grasp of Hispanic culture and the lucha scene or whatever. As I said, I don't know how this would have worked in Kansas City. But looking at this guy just with a fresh eye, he took a shitty turnbuckle. Then he almost fell over on a fucking move. Then he tried to do a spring leg drop off the bottom rope, but he fell in a heap because he's used to cables and those ropes don't have any spring. And then, it just... Again, I'm all through this, and my notes are Gable looks great. Gable's heat looks great. Gable's bump on the fucking Canadian Destroyer is classic. At one point, I thought after they did a big dive with Penta doing the big dive, it looked like he hit hard on the floor. they got back in. It started to drag a little bit, and there was a head kick. Was that supposed to connect? I'm not sure it did. But then they did the Canadian Destroyer and got the This Is Awesome, because the people in the WWE don't see Canadian Destroyers. If you give a guy one, he takes a great bump like Gable did and sells it like death. Well, that's just swell. But then Gable got an arm lock on him for a second, and then Penta came out and it did that thing where he drops him on his head, 1, 2, 3. So the point I'm making is he got over, and he got over with the crowd here. I think if these people didn't already want to like him in this building because they had a clue to his reputation or whatever, this match wouldn't have done it. Chad Gable worked his ass off. And the promo afterwards, as I said, he struggled to speak English, saying, "This is my new home." And the people were listening, kind of trying to get with it. But when he started speaking Spanish, it sounded good, and the people reacted to it. So for the and we've talked about this, for the Hispanic market, I think this guy's probably a big addition, but if they expect him to get over everywhere that hasn't seen him to this audience, then they better put him in with a lot of guys like Gable.
Well, it'll be interesting. I thought it was really good. I really enjoyed it. By the end of this, I was like, man, the first 45 minutes of Raw tonight have been amazing. Between the Punk angle and this. I liked it. The only thing
I was swallowing there. I would agree the Punk angle was amazing. This was all right.
I thought this was really good. Again, hot crowd. In saying that I thought Penta had a great debut doesn't take anything away from Chad Gable, who has always been a great worker.
Right.
We've been putting him over since him and Jordan were wrestling FTR or the Revival. His push has always been the issue. Again, it's the same character. Was it a year ago? Was it less? Where all of a sudden they were giving him kind of a serious push on Raw. He was going after, I think, the Intercontinental title, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Gunther. He was going after Gunther. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And then he went back to kind of being silly again. You talk about that Canadian Destroyer. The way he took that Canadian Destroyer may be the best bump I've ever seen taken off it, but more importantly, the reaction it got. It didn't just get a pop. It got like a, we've never seen that before pop. Now, this is a move that's been around forever.
But not in the WWE.
Exactly. Penta is one of the guys, I believe, guilty in the past in AEW, probably other places, where one guy does it and then they pop up and they run to the other rope and they hit the other guy and then they do it back and forth. This right here shows the importance of the difference. When you hit it one time and it's special, and in this case, it was right before the finish. I know it wasn't the finish. It was right before it. The crowd reaction was a big part of the story. The crying daughter at ringside. Penta did a promo in English. Again, not his first language. Did he ever speak English in AEW? Ever? Ever. They did a better job in one night. And again, Chad Gable's a great worker, but it's also his charisma and his personality too.
Right.
And, he stands out from the average luchador here in 2025. They did a better job in one night with the merchandising, with everything, with Penta, than Tony Khan and AEW did in 5 years.
Well, and
they talked about his past on commentary. Lucha, other than AEW, Lucha Underground Champion, TNA, whatever they said. They didn't say AEW, but they did about as good as you're going to do to put him over on night one.
And that's also something they're going to continue. They have producers for their matches. If you ever do see the spot where the one guy gives the destroyer and then the other guy hops up and blah, 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 back and forth, you'll never see it again, and they will have called it in the ring, and he'll get chastised for it because the producers won't allow that kind of thing to happen to keep the big pop when they see the move. And additionally, they're going to put him in with guys that can enhance him for the most part, rather than, again, on the other side of the street, they will put people in with anybody with that because Tony has no knowledge of or perspective on this guy's style won't lend itself well to getting this guy over that I want to get over. He won't be able to do his stuff right. I need to give him this guy or whatever. They just put people in there and hope for the best. So he will be produced and he will be much bigger, already is in this company than he was in AEW, because they'll accentuate the strengths and eliminate the weaknesses.
What'd you think of his selling? Did you ever see him sell like that in AEW?
Well, no, because they just hop up and do things. And at one point, I could see he's not used to this, right? When he was down trying to sell, I think, the leg or whatever. But he, again, is being produced. And the opponents will say, oh, no, if I'm going to do this, then we need to get this reaction, and then I'll do the other thing for you. And he will assimilate into the system, hopefully. But no, already, there was nobody producing them or explaining the flow of the match or any goal of business of the match. It was just, do what you guys do. Good or bad, that's what they were doing. Good and bad, both.
What do you think Ray Phoenix is thinking?
He's thinking, God damn it, if only I hadn't... the choke slam off the ring apron through the table where he broke his arm, that had to be where they're adding the time, right?
I don't know, because I think that may have been... That was a while ago. I think he had to have renewed since then, unless he signed a 5-year deal right out of the gate. I don't know.
Good Lord.